Before the comments fill up with taxonomical debates over whether this or that character truly fits the definition of a mama bear, because if I wanted to have that argument, I'd bring up MacGuffins, let me disclaim. The study of tropes is the study of patterns. The mama bear is not a character, she's what a host of different characters all have in common with each other. We note a trend, and we give the trend a name so it can be discussed. Not every character will have all the traits we associate with the pattern. Arguably, most won't. But the reason we give the pattern a name is because if there's a trend, it must be serving a purpose. The assumption is that men won't like the image of a woman with a gun. The purpose of the trope is to say, it's okay this time because she's a mom. And it's a lot less relevant that Charlie Baltimore doesn't perfectly fit the definition of a mama bear because she's also kind of a Vasquez than that her motherhood serves that same purpose. The assumption is men will accept that any male character, no matter how soft, if stripped to his essence will become violent. But with women, they need to be convinced. These are 6 different ways of contending with that assumption. Though you will, I hope, have noticed that almost every woman I've discussed here has been white. This is because if filmmakers assume a male audience needs to be convinced that a woman will become violent, a countervailing assumption is that a white audience doesn't need to be convinced that a person of color will. POC have their own set of tropes to contend with, tropes that have far less influence on the action movie as a whole, because violent black women are even rarer than violent white ones, because the codification of movie violence is deeply informed by the presumed whims of straight white men. It's an open question whether many straight white men actually need these reassurances to enjoy a violent film, though it's clear a lot have come to expect them. Action movie violence isn't just violence, it's power. And power in the hands of the disadvantaged is very threatening to those with privilege. Fury Road is very interested in the flow of power. In it, women may possess violence, but lacking it does not make them helpless. It does not insist that masculinity is the only way to wield power and vilifies those who do. It refuses to objectify its female characters, but doesn't strip them of all sexuality in the process. It valorizes motherhood without pretending what makes a woman powerful is her ability to provide men with babies. It offers many models of femininity without treating any one as more normal or valid than the others. And it engages the way women suffer under patriarchy without using that suffering as cheap pathos or easy thrills. In short, the assumption baked into all the tropes we've discussed, that violence, power, is the domain of men that women can only enter in exceptional cases, is flatly ignored. Feminine presence in this masculine space is not treated as a transgression. Men who would consider it one are personified in the villain, and no attempt is made to soothe the male ego at the sight of women holding guns and crossbows. That alone would make a movie remarkable. But I don't think we can stake a movie's greatness on what it doesn't do. So, if you'll permit me, I'll get to the goddamn point. No matter how many women are in it, the core of an action movie is about solving your problems with violence. That an appropriate show of force will put things right again. Fury Road is no different in this respect, and in our society, this is considered to be the male power fantasy, one that has been enforced by thousands of repetitions. So what then does it mean to portray a woman living out that fantasy? Does her presence decouple the association between violence and manliness? Or is living out a male power fantasy a kind of drag? Is performing that fantasy performing masculinity? Is every action heroine in a functional sense a Vasquez? Is the action film too thoroughly encoded male to be reclaimed? Can movie violence ever truly be feminine? I don't think I or any single movie can answer that question. However, if you said, let's just assume the answer is yes, and imagine what that movie would look like, you might imagine Fury Road. And I'm going to explain why without using the phrase delusion corporeality. Let's talk about the two bags. When Max lets Furiosa and the wives into the war rig, he does not yet trust them, so for safety, he collects all the weapons in the cab and puts them in a bag that he keeps with him, a satchel full of Chekhov's guns, and you will see every one of them fired. Later, after Angharad's death, the wives take stock of its contents.
Angharad used to call them anti-seed. plant one and watch something die.
When the wives stay the night with the Vovolini, a woman called the Keeper of the Seeds has this exchange with the Dag.
Seeds.
These are from home. Heirlooms. The real thing.
Ah, so many different kinds.
Trees, flowers, fruit.
She shows this to the Dag after a conversation about murder.
You kill people with that, do ya?
Killed everyone I ever met out here. Headshots, all of them, snap right in the medulla.
Thought somehow you girls were above all that.
And here's what the bag means to her.
Back then, everyone had their fill. Back then, there was no need to snap anybody.
This bag represents an idealized vision of the past, when the savagery of the post-apocalypse wasn't necessary, when peace was, at least, possible. This is the bag that is pointedly taken with them when they go to overthrow Joe's society, being the only place around that could actually sustain plant life and abundance. So, there you have it, a bag of seed and a bag of anti-seed. One full of weapons from the Citadel, and one full of sprouts from the green place of many mothers. One representing the toxic masculine warmongering directly implicated in the fall of civilization.
You're an old man's battle fodder, killing everyone and everything!
We're not to blame!
Then who killed the world?
And one representing a potential rebirth of society, spearheaded by a pack of moms and highly symbolic pregnancies. Fury Road ain't good because it's subtle. So yeah, Joe fights to maintain the savagery of the post-apocalypse because that's where he's amassed his power, and the Vovolini fight to bring an end to it. That's the difference between toxic masculinity and egalitarian feminism, right? Women represent peace, so we should put them in charge, and a little blood must be shed along the way. That is a reading fully supported by the text. And you might well respond, hey, most every action movie insists that the good guy's violence is justified and will lead to peace, and only the bad guy's violence leads to continuing violence. There's nothing particularly subversive about that, and you'd be right. But let me give a different reading. Joe's power derives from controlling the water supply and arable land, and thereby agriculture. His power dissolves if someone else can provide his people with resources. So a bag of seeds can represent a feminine rebirth, or it can represent liberation at the hands of women from the existing power structure. Not an end to violence, but an end to unjust violence. Not an end to scarcity, but an end to false scarcity. An end to subjugation. An end to autocracy. Violence as a tilling of the soil, destructive to what was, but generative for what will be. It's not about violence good versus violence bad, but what is your violence in service of? I don't think anyone's under the impression that violence will not exist in their new world, because in Fury Road, violence is often justified. As in the real world, people rarely earn their freedom without getting a little bit rowdy. It's about who gets to wield violence and to what end. Is your violence about consolidating power or distributing it? Is it possessive or protective? Does it enforce a vertical power structure or a lateral one? This is why I feel saying women represent peace is too simplistic. This is where I feel the movie crosses from ignoring the violence equals masculinity, peace equals femininity coding at the root of so many female characters to countering it.
Many mothers. My initiate mother was K.D. Concannon. I am the daughter of Mary Jobasa.
Furiosa was born to a clan of warrior women, kidnapped, enslaved, and put into service of a warlord. And the wives she fights to liberate have been kept in a cell to keep them from revolting against their captor. Violence, power, is not a thing Joe possesses that women learn or absorb through contact. It's something he's expended considerable effort to keep them from, something he controls their access to the same way he controls the water. Violence is something he stole from them. In Fury Road, violence is egalitarian, and any imbalance between who is its owner and who is subject to it is an unnatural state imposed from without. Joe, patriarchy itself, forces women into subservient roles to dissuade them from reclaiming what is theirs by rights. Violence is human. The vicarious thrill of watching violence is human, and empathy with those who enact violence in service of a righteous cause is human. The idea that any of these things are male is a product of men, warlords, movie producers, audiences, overly invested in a narrative because the narrative benefits them. I would like to dub Furiosa the Avenging Feminine. A new trope. The woman who takes back what's hers. The woman who fights because it's her right to fight and against men who tell her it's not. The woman who makes no affordances to men in the audience and implicates them in her struggle if they don't like it. The woman who fights to bring the same freedom to other women. I would like to dub this a new archetype, because it's one I think the action film sorely needs, and I selfishly want another Fury Road. That's what I would like to do. But wishing doesn't make it so. I can, if I try, point to a few characters who have some of the necessary qualities, but it's not enough to make a pattern. Tropes aren't tropes just because I say they are. The Avenging Feminine remains not unprecedented, but all too rare. Fury Road cannot on its own reclaim the action movie. But all it takes to make a trend is volume. If people keep asking, what if the answer to this question is yes, and keep imagining what that movie would look like, maybe folks can get their heads around the idea that violence is not masculine by nature, only by custom. And with enough time, enough guns, enough cars, enough explosions, customs can change.